Today we'll be talking about Black Lives Do Matter. The healthcare system has been failing the minority groups in the United States now for years. Welcome to the Prosperity RX podcast. This is Keith Abell with your prescription for prosperity. This is a podcast where I give you hope. I show you the path to build a life of health, wealth, and prosperity. To build a life that you don't need a vacation from. Folks, we've all messed up by believing some of the prevailing wellness and money myths in our culture. The turning point in your life, however, comes when you're willing to own up to it, to take your health and your finances into your own hands, to claw your way out of whatever's holding you back and never live in that lie again. Let me ask you, what good is your wealth if you have poor health? And what good is your health if you have no wealth? If you're willing to own up to it, to accept that you do have the power to change your circumstances, and that you're willing to do whatever it takes, then this podcast is for you. Humorist Josh Billings said, health is like money. We never have a true idea of its value until we lose it. You truly can change your life and start on the true path for good health, financial peace, and prosperity. So let's get on with the show. Hello, everybody. This is pharmacist Keith Abell. I am a practicing pharmacist, a blogger, podcaster, home business entrepreneur. I am a certified holistic health coach. And today we're going to be talking with Dr. Wallach on this Health and Wellness Hour about Black Lives Do Matter. Dr. Wallach is a biomedical research pioneer. He's considered the founder of Liquid Vitamins and Minerals. He's earned a bachelor's degree of science in agriculture from the University of Missouri with a major in husbandry, which is animal husbandry, which is nutrition, and also a minor in field crops and soils. He earned his doctorate in veterinary medicine and then 3 postdoctorate fellowships. He spent more than 40 years in the field of veterinary medicine, observing and researching the effects of individual nutrients on animals, and then went on to earn a doctorate degree in naturopathic medicine, where he serves as a physician since 1982. As a pathologist, he's performed over 32,000 autopsies on various species of animals and humans. The culmination of that work is in a textbook called The Diseases of Exotic Animals, which is in the Smithsonian Institute as a national treasure. He's held key positions in zoos and universities throughout the United States. He worked as the research veterinarian for the South African National Parks and Wildlife Development Department, where he intimately was involved with the Operation Rhino project to try to help save the white rhino from extinction. He also led expeditions in, I'm going to say it wrong, Dr. Wallach, Wanky Game Preserve to capture and mark elephants, to capture and mark elephants so they can study the migration habits of the animals. He's been published now more than 70 times in scientific and medical journals. He's written 15 books in addition to the one in the Smithsonian. His lecture, Dead Doctors Don't Lie, was recorded on audio cassette and has now been reproduced in 9 languages with over 600 million in circulation. He currently has 2 nationally syndicated daily radio shows, and before COVID, traveled extensively throughout the United States and Canada and Mexico, and has recruited an army of like-minded individuals, including myself, to get his message of health and well-being out to the masses.
Okay, well, thank you, Pharmacist Keith. Thank you so much for the kind words and the introduction. Appreciate it, and always enjoy working with you. We want to specifically go from Black Lives Matter deeper into the subject of black gene lies. And I want to go back to the days of the plantations to start out with, when there were slaves, and it was just, a terrible time for society in the country. And there's a disparity, the big disparity in the longevity between the white folks who owned the plantation and the slaves. Now, you'd think it would be just the opposite, but the owners of the plantations would live to be 45 to 60, and the slaves would live to be 85, 90, 100, 110. And the reason, well, they gave them a respectful name, Uncle Remus, Uncle Tom. They wouldn't call him Mr. because that granted him too much superiority. So they called him Uncle. Okay, as a respect, when they reached 75 years old, they started calling him Uncle Tom, Uncle Remus, Uncle George, and so on. And so why did the slaves live to be 105 and the owners of the plantations die at 45? Well, that's because the owners of the plantation, when they killed a pig or a cow or a sheep or a deer, they would eat the meat and all the prime cuts of meat. And the slaves were forced to eat the organ meats, the heart and the liver, where all the minerals were stored in the liver, of course, and the tendons and the ligament, pig's feet. They would eat the tendons and ligaments and the bones and the cartilage. And the plantation owners are just eating the meat. Okay, and so who is getting more nutrition? The slaves. And so that's why they live longer. Okay, and nobody ever figured it out until me as a pathologist came along and did a lot of research on it and figured it out. There are no genetically transmitted diseases in any vertebrates, including human beings. All of the diseases said to be genetic in the Black community are not. High blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, things like kidney disease, lung disease, Alzheimer's disease, things like autoimmune disease like lupus and so forth. None of these are true. They're all just simple nutritional deficiency diseases. And of course, this is one of the reasons why the Black community has a higher risk of death from COVID than the white community. Okay. It's worse than lack of care in the hospitals. I believe they probably get the same bad care in hospitals for the Black people as they do the white people. But there's a long story that goes along with the book Black Gene Lies and the CD, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I've worked with many very well-known Black individuals, including Coretta Scott King. When I met her, she only had a couple of weeks to live. We put on her program, got her off all the bad foods, no fried foods, which is very common in the Black community. No fried foods, no processed meats, no oils, no glutens, no wheat granos, and got her on rice and sweet potatoes and baked and grilled meats and fish instead of fried, and got her on the 90 essential nutrients. And she lived 3 more years and was able to work with churches and all kinds of stuff during those 3 years. Was very active, wasn't bedridden. And we're just very grateful to be able to give her those 3 extra years. We worked many years with Martin Luther King III. Was introduced to Andy Young, okay, from the Civil Rights Movement. He was the mayor of Atlanta at the time. And he was scheduled at Emory University for double knee replacement because he had bone-to-bone arthritis. And one of his employees was one of our people. So he connected us, and I said, sir, why don't you give me 90 days, and I believe I can rebuild your cartilage and everything, and you won't have the risk of surgery. He says, well, I'll try anything. And so to make a long story short, in the 90 days, we rebuilt his knees, and he was perfectly normal. And of course, he felt better, perfect blood pressure, no diabetes, no obesity, and he's able to travel the world and do his thing, which he was very good at. And he began to introduce me to famous people, including Evander Holyfield, great champion heavyweight boxer who had a heart attack. And after all his great years of boxing, he had a heart attack and he had to surrender because of his health. He surrendered his championship. And I was introduced to him again by Andy Young, and we put him on our program. A year later, he goes back and he had to fight to get his championship back. They didn't give him his championship back. Okay, he had to fight to get it, and he boxed for 3 more years because we rebuilt him and his heart using our 90 essential nutrients. And then people like basketball players like Theo Ratliff, okay? And he was too fragile to play ball. He was 28 years old and had bone-to-bone arthritis in his knees. His cartilage popped off his hip, and he fractured his wrist catching a pass from a teammate. And the Atlanta Hawks took his contract away from him because he was too fragile to play professional ball. So I rebuilt him. And within 90 days, he got hired, I think it was by a team in Texas, and he got a contract for $40 million. Not bad for a guy who was too fragile to play ball. And he played for another 11 years and so forth, and has been a great. In fact, our Rebound, our sports drink, was made for him. Okay, it has 100 nutrients in it. We have it in the 12-ounce cans. We also have it in the little individual servings. We have 30 servings in a box, and it has 100 nutrients, 78 of which are minerals. We're very, very proud of that. And of course, we put extra of one mineral in there so that there wouldn't be any risk of him dying of a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy heart attack. 25,000 young athletes in America under the age of 20 drop dead each year from hypertrophic cardiomyopathy heart attacks. Okay, Dr. Milan and I did 1,700 autopsies on kids under the age of 10 in Qishan, China, that have died of that. It was also the cause of crib death. And we gave Jerry Lewis in 2011 all the information where we had shown very clearly that crib death was actually caused by this deficiency of this nutrient, not by the mothers laying on the babies. Only 2% were in bed with their mothers. And he got so excited. And we talked about muscular dystrophy. We showed him how we could prevent and cure muscular dystrophy. He got excited about that one, and he took it to the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and they fired him the same day. I mean, he didn't even give it to him and walk out. He gave him the information, and they fired him right there. And by 2015, the Muscular Dystrophy Association had to actually shut down the telethon because they couldn't raise a penny without Jerry Lewis. And these are the sort of things we do with the Black community. And then, of course, all kinds of boxers, football players, basketball players, soccer players, athletes all over the world, politicians from all over the world. And we started dealing with the pastors. They were getting word of what was going on here. And they wanted to know how we're healing all these people. And I did a big series of lectures with Benny Hinn, which are still posted. You can go on to Benny Hinn stuff. And one of the first big name Black pastors that came to me was Pastor Creflo Dollar from Atlanta, Georgia. And he had a daughter who was 12 years old at the time. When I met him, it was 2004, I think, 2002. And she was born with asthma, and the doctors told him this was a genetic form of asthma found in Black kids, and that she wouldn't live to be 12. Well, she was 12 years old now, and she was having 4 and 5 and 6 crises a day, and they were barely able to save her. And one of his church members contacted me and told me the story. And I said, well, there's no genetic diseases in people. There's no genetic diseases in Black people. And so connect me. So we did a 3-way with Pastor Dollar. And I said, sir, if you want, we can, try and save your daughter because there's no genetic diseases. It's not a genetic disease. It's a nutritional deficiency disease. He said, I'll try anything. So to make a long story short, we took her off all the bad foods, no fried foods, no processed meats, no oils, no glutens, no wheat, bran, rye, oats, no sugars. Got her on the 90 essential nutrients, and in 2 weeks' time, she was cured. After 12 years of getting worse and worse and worse, and having asthma attacks 4, 5, 8, 10 times a day. And so he contacted me and said, okay, my daughter's cured here. Nobody can believe this, but I'm just in awe. I always give credit to the Lord, okay, when I start talking to pastors, because I don't want to be greedy and take credit for something that they've created, that God's created, not me. And so he said, now, there's a lot of diseases in Black people said to be genetic. I said, no, sir, they're not genetic. Doctors just don't know the cause, so they blame it on your genes, so they don't have to say, I don't know. Because they know everything. Just ask them. And he starts laughing. He says, okay, I understand. He said, I'm going to give you about 15 people from my main church here in Atlanta who are seniors. They're all over age 70. They've got these terrible, quote, genetic diseases, high blood pressure, diabetes, kidney disease, obesity, heart disease, and they're due to die anytime. They've got this genetic disease, according to the doctors. And I said, well, I can reverse all that if they'll get off all the bad foods, the fried foods, the processed meats, the oils, the glutens, wheat, bran, rye, oats, and sugar, and take the 90 essential nutrients. He says, okay, we'll make it happen. Okay, to make a long story short, in 90 days, they were all cured. And he says, you got to come give a lecture at my church. So I did. And of course, it was taped. He had all kinds of equipment to record it, which was quite a thing for me back then. And we called it Black Gene Lies, and the recording, and it was just a big seller. It still is all over the world today. And then he says, well, I want you to put all the diseases said to be genetically transmitted in black people that are not into a book. Okay, so that was the name of my CD from my lecture in his church, Black Gene Lies, and it's the title of this book that he paid for the publication in 2006, okay, and he paid for the first 10,000 books to be published, okay, and here I said the first 10,000 because we've done it dozens of times since then, okay, it sells all over the world as a set, the Black Gene Lies book and the Black Gene Lies CD from my lecture in his church, and they're available through your team there, okay? And so I appreciate that. And we're talking about, again, obesity. We're talking about high blood pressure, diabetes. We're talking about arthritis. We're talking about lupus. We're talking about kidney disease and kidney failure and dialysis and arthritis and osteoporosis and infertility and every birth defect you can name, none of which are caused by genetic diseases. That's why my thesis for my postdoctoral fellowship, kind of like a PhD degree, is in the Smithsonian Institute. That just represents 20,000 of my 32,000 autopsies. 20,000 of them were for that project. And if you can get one of W.B. Saunders, which was the biggest medical publishing house at the time, published it as a textbook, went hardcover. They published 30,000 to begin with. They sold them all out in like 6 months. They sold them for $25,000 each. Now, I'm not telling you that to brag. I'm telling you that just for credibility here. Now, you can go on Amazon right now or Siri and say how many diseases of exotic animal books are available for sale, and they'll pop them up there. I was just looking the other day, and there's dozens of them for sale. There's no new ones. Okay, but ones that are used in acceptable condition are selling for $8,000 to $12,000 each. Ones that are beat up and used in the, lots of notes in the margins, the cover torn off, they sell for anywhere from $4,500 to $8,000. Again, I'm just telling you, people want the information. Well, Black Gene Lies, the books, I don't even know what it costs. It's somewhere around $25 or something like that. And the CDs, of course, all our CDs sell for $3 a piece, and if you buy 10, there's a nice discount if you buy 10 of them. And you can get all this through Pharmacist Keith's program here and Zoom. So if you're not associated yet, contact Pharmacist Keith and his team. If you already are a member, go for it, because every black kid in America, every black kid in the world needs to listen to the CD and read the book. It will give them so much hope and belief in their future because there are no black genes. Okay, back to you, Pharmacist Keith.
Thank you, Dr. Wallach. I remember back in pharmacy school, and the topic at the time was blood pressure and the different blood pressure medications. And one of the questions I asked the professor is, well, why don't we try to cure the people of the blood pressure issue? Because we knew from our lectures and all that blood pressure was being caused by lifestyle, diet, exercise, that type of thing. And his answer was, because the people aren't going to do what they need to do. So they're going to be on the blood pressure medicine for life. Now, at that time, they said nothing about it being genetic or anything. But then when we start talking about the African-American community, suddenly everything was genetic. And that always seemed odd to me. So when I finally met you and spent some time with you back in 2013 on the road, you blew my mind with this particular topic. Now, you mentioned that it's not genetic, that it's being caused by nutritional deficiencies.
That's correct.
Primarily because of gluten intolerance. But even without gluten intolerance, diet, exercise, lack of nutrients being in the food to start with. So let's talk about a couple of the different things you mentioned there. We've already talked about gluten a little bit. You mentioned fried foods. So what's going on with fried foods?
Okay, well, fried foods are the cause of blockages in the arteries. Cholesterol has nothing to do with that. Cholesterol doesn't cause blockages in the arteries. Cholesterol does not cause heart disease. Cholesterol makes up 75% of your brain weight. Cholesterol makes up 95% of the weight of testosterone and estrogen. You want lots of cholesterol. Eat 3 eggs with soft yolks 3 times a day. If a doctor tells you to give up cholesterol and wants to write you a prescription for statin drugs, say, sir, I apologize, but I'm going to have to leave and I'm going to find myself a new doctor because you might be killing me by getting me off of cholesterol, okay? Now, with that, when you get plaque in the arteries, blood pressure goes up. Now, why does blood pressure go up when you get plaque in the arteries? Well, because you don't just get plaque in the arteries in your coronary arteries, you get plaque in the arteries all over, including in the kidneys. When you get plaque in the arteries of the kidneys, restricts the blood supply into the kidneys, and the blood test will show that the kidneys are not filtering the blood very efficiently because they're not getting the blood, because the arteries going into the kidneys are filled with this plaque. Well, when that happens, the kidney releases a hormone, okay, called renin, R-E-N-I-N. You may remember that from school, R-E-N-I-N. Okay, and the purpose of the renin is to drive your blood pressure up, to drive more blood through the blocked arteries into the kidneys so the kidney can filter the dirty blood.
So it's a natural response.
It's a natural response.
And the doctors look at it and say, something's unnatural here. We need to give you a drug to stop it.
That's correct. And then, of course, they say you got to stay away from salt, you know, when you have high blood pressure, particularly if you're black. Now, I'm going to go back to 1920 when we put iodine in salt. That's when they first actually made iodized salt. It was in the 1920s. We pretty much eliminated goiter in the black community and the white community all over the world because of putting iodine in the salt, iodized salt. Everybody knew about that. Every little kid knew about iodized salt and the goiter and everything. And then in about 1930, just before the Second World War, they say, you can't use salt because it causes high blood pressure. Well, within 2 years' time, everybody got goiter again because they didn't say, well, don't forget, you got to supplement with some iodine when you give up salt. They didn't tell them that, so that everybody just gave up salt and they got goiter again. So that's why we have the ocean's gold to make sure, because they knew in the year 3600 BC, in the year 3600 BC, there was a healer, okay, who realized that if he gave dried ocean grasses and seaweed and stuff like that to people that had goiter, it would go away in a couple of weeks. He didn't know why. He just knew that the dry seaweed would do that. Well, in the 1830s, they identified iodine as the reason why the goiter could be reversed by eating seaweed. By 1920, they figured out how to put iodine in salt, so it was iodized salt, and goiter went away until doctors started telling people to give up salt because it caused high blood pressure. No, no, no. They missed it by 1,000 miles. And again, they created more diseases when they tell people to do things like that. And so sea salt, which we have, of course, we have the pink Himalayan salt, and we have the pink Himalayan salt with black pepper in it. So those two have 84 minerals in them. 84 minerals in the sea salt and the pink Himalayan salt, 84 minerals. Now, you see all these vitamins and minerals on TV. They say, complete nutrition, 27 nutrients. Well, that's not even a third of the 90 essential nutrients.
Right.
And so you can see why we've been hampered here. And getting down to the basic root of the question you asked before, when somebody goes to a doctor today, whether they're black or white or yellow or red, you go to a doctor and say, you know, I've been reading and listening to that Wallach talking and everything like that. Shouldn't I be taking some vitamins and minerals to supplement my diet? Nah, just eat well. You get everything you need. Don't waste your money on vitamins and minerals. You can get everything you need just by eating well. Well, that would be like a mechanic telling you, after you ask, say, look, I just got my favorite car. I got a Jaguar here. And what kind of oil should I put in there? Don't waste your money putting oil in that car. You're just wasting your money. Just put dirt from Texas in there. There's bound to be some oil in that dirt. Now, an insane person would not do that to their car. But when a doctor says, oh, just eat well, you get everything you need. My doctor said, oh, I can get everything I need just by eating well. And then you die.
Yeah.
Okay. Nutritional minerals do not occur in a uniform blanket around the crust of the earth. They occur in veins like chocolate and chocolate ice cream. They occur in veins like gold and silver and coal. And there's places on earth where people live on the average to be 160 to 200 years of age. This was written up by a New York Times reporter by the name of James Hilton, 1933. It became a best-selling book. The New York Times sent him to this place called Hunza, where the Giltar Glacier is, okay, between Pakistan and China. They're the longest-lived people on earth. They don't even know what they're doing. Okay, they're just drinking the water from the Giltar Glacier. They're using it to irrigate with. They use it to cook with. But it has more minerals in it than any other water on earth. Okay, and that's because the Giltar Glacier is grinding up all the minerals and the rocks and the canyon walls that's coming through. And you see these announcements, and I have a collection of these announcements in the newspapers. So-and-so celebrated their 148th birthday, and the picture of them, they're out in the garden with their sleeves rolled up and their long pants rolled up to their knees, and they're out there gardening at 168 years of age. This is documented by the government, okay? And so James Hilton spent a year at the cost of the New York Times newspaper because there was a guy, Dr. Chi, he was claiming he was 265 years of age. He said, this guy's got to be defrauding people. So he sent him to China. He goes there. He spends a year following this guy around, documenting this, documenting that, getting fingerprints and going back years where he'd been and so on, talking to people, generation after generation. And he came to the conclusion that it was quite correct. So he sent this article. It was in the New York Times, and it became a book called Lost Horizon in 1933, and they made a movie out of it, Lost Horizon. And he created a term called Shangri-La, where people live forever. Okay, and that's where that came from, was James Hilton following up on that Hunza story.
All right, so we talked about how fried foods are bad.
Yes. Yeah, because they cause plaque in the arteries. They cause plaque in the arteries. They cause oxidative damage and increase your risk of cancer. That's why the black population have such a high risk of cancer. They have such a high risk of blocked arteries and kidney failure and have to be on dialysis and so on. But we had one guy, he hadn't peed, pharmacist Keith, in 10 years. Hadn't peed in 10 years. He was on dialysis 6 days a week. He'd been on dialysis for 25 years. To make a long story short, in 2 weeks' time, we put him on our program for high blood pressure. And in 2 weeks' time, he's peeing. So they reduced his dialysis from 6 days a week, which he'd been on for 10 years, down to 3 days a week. And in 2 more weeks, he was totally cured after 25 years being on dialysis and 10 years, six days a week. Now, I have to tell you one more story about a pastor here. I almost forgot to tell you the story. He's a black pastor from Baltimore, Maryland. Okay. And Pastor Mike Freeman.
Oh, yeah. You've talked about him before.
Yeah. And Pastor Mike Freeman, I mean, he has TV, he has Zoom, webinars all over the world. I mean, he is on every day, even today, since they can't have, he is from his house still doing all this. And one of our great associates who's been with us, Miss Linda, and she has a lot to do with this Black Gene Lies thing. Okay. She's been with me, gosh, going on, I don't know, got to be 15, 16 years. And about 6, 7 years ago now, when the bird flu went up the East Coast, Pastor Mike was extremely sick and got the virus in his lungs and everything. And he was very, very ill. And the doctor said, look, he's not going to live till morning. He's uncomfortable. He's really, really dying. And so they put him in an induced coma and into a room with, they had 10 other guys they had done this to, okay, during this bird flu thing 6, 7 years ago. And they said all of these guys, including Pastor Mike, would be dead before the sun came up. Well, the next morning, 10 out of the 11 were dead. Guess which one was alive? Pastor Mike. Well, why was that? Because Miss Linda was giving Pastor Mike's wife these plain minerals, or plant minerals, has the 78 minerals in it, and told her to put the face cloths on his legs and his belly and keep him soaked with these minerals every 15 minutes. Because he didn't have an IV, he didn't have a G tube, so there's no way she could get him into him any other way other than just let him absorb him through his skin. Well, he was the only one alive the next morning. he wasn't just alive, but he was so excited about surviving and flourishing. He goes on his remember, this guy's got all these TV studios and everything. And he's telling the world how God's mineral had saved him, how God's minerals had saved him. And we made interviews on his TV and his webinars and Zooms and everything. And it's called Praise the Lord and Pass the 90. It's a DVD and a CD, Praise the Lord and Pass the 90. And every black kid in America and the world needs to also listen to the CD and watch the DVD, Praise the Lord and Pass the 90.
There's another thing that I hear doctors tell minorities, African Americans, is to avoid their red meat. And I can remember as a kid, when we drive through the minority neighborhood, that you would see these big smokers set up on the corner, and I mean the steaks and the ribs and the chicken just being smoked out there on the rib, and it just looked and smelled so wonderful. But what is it that's wrong with red meat?
Well, nothing's wrong with red meat. All the great religious leaders, all of the saints were what? Were they carpenters? Well, Jesus was a carpenter, but all of his saints were what? They were herdsmen. They had flocks of sheep and cattle and all this kind of stuff like that. Red meat was the first food, goes back to the beginning of time. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with red meat as long as you don't burn it. If you burn it, you're burning the fat, which turns into trans fats, heterocyclamines, and acrylamides, which cause plaque in your arteries and also causes cancer. So if you're going to eat red meat, which I've been doing for 81 years, okay, twice a day. This morning I did have smoked salmon for breakfast with my 3 soft poached eggs and my rice and my yogurt and all my 90 essential nutrients and so forth. As long as you cook your meat medium or medium rare, which I do, never cook it well done, okay, because you're burning the fat. They have these machines now, these, I don't know what they call them, these machine fryers, so you don't have to fry it in oil.
Air fryers.
Air fryers, yeah. Well, they heat the fat in the meat, even chicken. They heat the fat in chicken and fish up to frying temperatures, which turns it into trans fats, heterocyclamines, and acrylamides. So it's not going to reduce the risk of death and blocked arteries and stuff from cancer and so on, because it's still heating the fat in the meat, in the fish, in the poultry up to frying temperatures. So it'll be a little bit cleaner as far as cleaning up the kitchen, but as far as reducing disease, the answer is no, because it's still causing that problem. And there's 2 bad things that happen with frying. Number one, you're heating the fat, either the oils or the fat in the meat and the fish, to these frying temperature, which again turns it into terrible chemicals, heterocyclamines and acrylamides. But also, what do they roll the fish and the chicken in before they fry it? Flour, wheat flour. And of course, you have flour tortillas and bread and croutons and spaghetti. And when you look at the country that has the highest rate of percentage of deaths, Italy, they are the gluten country. Spaghetti, mustaccioli, pizza crust. They didn't have gluten-free pizza crust back then. Okay, and I'm sure they don't even, it's probably illegal. It's a hanging offense to have gluten-free pizza crust in Italy. Everything in Italy is made from wheat, okay? And so that's why they have the highest rate of death from COVID. The percentage is 10%. 10% death rate in the Italians from COVID. Now their next door neighbors, the Germans, their death rate is 0.5%. It's only 0.5%, and that's because they primarily eat potatoes. German potato salad is very famous. They primarily potatoes, corn, and rice. When you look at India, 2/3 of the Indian countries right now from India eat rice. Only 1/3 eat wheat and corn and rice. And back 100 years ago, when they had the Spanish flu, 20 million died from the Spanish flu. 110 million were infected. Today, they only have, I think it's 38,000 dead. No, I take that back. It's 3,800 dead. Okay. And is that less than 20 million? Of course it is.
Oh, yeah. So what about smoking the meat?
Well, I eat smoked salmon for breakfast, and you can
I
smoke the
heard you
meat.
say that.
Yep. And so smoking is fine. And so I will either have smoked salmon from Alaska or Norway. I probably have that 3 or 4 days a week as my animal flesh with breakfast. But I also have a steak. I will have a lamb. Every once in a while, they will sell lamb on the bone. And so, we'll buy a couple 100 pounds of that and put it in the freezer and nibble on that, for 3 or 4 months until they do it again. And so we eat a lot of poultry, a lot of fish, lamb, beef. When I can get it, I will eat deer and moose and that kind of stuff. When I lived in Africa for 2 years, I lived almost entirely on impala and wildebeest and Cape buffalo and that kind of stuff. So I've just been eating red meats. I grew up on an Angus farm, so we ate meat from the time before I was born.
All right, another staple in the American diet, carbonated drinks. So
Well, carbonated
what's
drinks,
wrong with the carbonated drinks?
Well, carbonated drinks, they have a lot of sugar in them, okay, but also they have carbonation, which neutralizes your stomach acid. And of course, when doctors came out with these, and you're a pharmacist, so you probably fulfill lots of prescriptions for a lot of these drugs to neutralize people's stomach issues, okay, gastroparesis and belching, burping, and bloating and so forth. They said, oh, you got to give up salt. You got to give up acid stuff, no carbonated drinks. Well, carbonation neutralizes stomach acid. And stomach acid keeps your stomach sterile. When you're making stomach acid, you have little cells, okay, in your stomach lining called chief cells that make stomach acid. Why would the good Lord put chief cells in your stomach if he didn't want you to have stomach acid? Okay, so the chief cells take sodium chloride, salt, and make stomach acid out of it, hydrochloric acid, and that's required to break down long chain amino acids into little short chain amino acids so you can absorb them. Also breaks down other foods into smaller particles so you can digest them. Very important. And it keeps your stomach sterile. Having a pH in your stomach below 2 is important. You do not want to get up to 7, which is neutral. You do not want to get there because bacteria begin to grow there and they ferment stuff and you're going to get bloating, burping, belching, and all this kind of stuff. Terrible things going on. You're not going to be able to absorb nutrients and so on because you can't break them down into small particles so you can absorb them. So everything that doctors are telling you about salt is incorrect, in addition to the people giving up the iodine and iodized salt. And so any doctor who tells you to give up salt should be put in jail for manslaughter. And we're talking probably if he's got 1,000 patients, he's probably killed hundreds of them. And that's why our Zoom that we did is being put into a DVD. Okay, it's a Zoom DVD. That's from about 3 weeks ago now. We're going to call it, Is Your Doctor Killing You? Is Your Doctor Killing You? Everybody really has loved that particular Zoom. It has gone all over the world. I'm very proud of you. Thank you for doing that. And it's probably driving you crazy for all the requests you're getting from it. But it'll be ready by the end of this week for sale. It's called Is Your Doctor Killing You? And it's the natural follow-up to my original audio cassette tape, Dead Doctors Don't Lie. The only time a doctor won't lie is when he's dead. I have to say one more thing here, and this should be very, very important to the black community. Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Maryland is a very, very famous medical school and teaching hospital and so forth. And they just published about 6 weeks ago a study where they looked at the top 8 things that kill people, what people die from in hospitals. Now, this is just in hospitals. They said the number 1 killer is heart disease. Now, is that heart disease that they die from in the hospital there? Okay, in American hospitals? Or is it a combination of heart disease and heart procedures that the doctor's killed you on the surgery table doing a heart transplant kind of thing, okay? I have to follow up on that. Number 2 is cancer. Again, was it the cancer killing that many people? Or was it a combination of cancer deaths and people who died during procedures in the hospital at the hands of doctors? Number 3, the third leading cause of death in hospitals, in American hospitals, is medical errors by doctors. Now, this is not medical errors outside the hospital. This is in the hospital. It's the number 3 cause of death in American hospitals. Now, this is Johns Hopkins that came out with this, and I'm just repeating what they've got published in medical journals. Okay? They said number 3 is medical errors, which kills 250,000 to 440,000 patients each year in hospitals. And they don't even get a parking ticket. The doctor doesn't even get a parking ticket. What other industry could you kill 440,000 of your customers in your workplace and not even get a parking ticket? Okay? Doctors are the most dangerous people on earth. A hospital is the most dangerous place on earth. So again, I want you to get a hold of, especially if you're black or you're red, you know, you could be a Native American, you're black, you're any other minority. You want to get a hold of this book, Black Gene Lies. You want to get a hold of the CD that goes along with it. Okay, Black Gene Lies. And it will make you cry because none of these things are genetic. High blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, arthritis, heart disease, cancer. All these things are connected with bad nutrition and lack of nutrients. Tells you what to take if you got the diseases and survive. Tells you what to take to prevent these diseases so you don't need to go to the hospital. And if you get the quartet of books, Let's Play Doctor, Let's Play Herbal Doctor, Passport to Aromatherapy, and it's all in your head. Okay, there's 25 different diseases you get. It's very common in black folks. You get 25 different diseases when you get osteoporosis of the skull. Okay, and these books tell you how to diagnose these things yourself. You don't need to go to a doctor. You don't need to go to a doctor to get a diagnosis of diabetes or high blood pressure. You can do it yourself. It costs you $1.50 for a test strip. You can either pee on it or get one to stick yourself and get a blood test. You don't have to pay $100 for an office call and $200 for the laboratory fee. It costs you $1.50 to diagnose whether you have diabetes or not. I urge everybody to do it yourself. The odds are you're not going to kill yourself by peeing on a test strip. You go to the doctor's office, oh, you know, we got to put you in the hospital and run some tests. Bam, you're dead.
Want to go back a little bit. We're talking about reflux, and this is something that never made sense to me. You know, you get the reflux, understand what the doctors are trying to do. If you don't take care of the reflux problem, eventually you get esophageal cancer because of all the acid destroying the esophagus. So their response is to give a drug now, a proton pump inhibitor, that permanently reduces your acid. You know, even if you had some kind of sphincter problem and acid was getting up there, you know, a Tums will take care of it temporarily until you can get your body back to where it's supposed to be. But permanently, that just never made sense to me. That's causing all kinds of nutritional deficiencies because of it. I mean, you need acid to break down your minerals so you can use them.
Now, I want you to, you mentioned Tums. You mentioned Tums. You know, doctors will tell a black person who doesn't have a very big income, and say, look, you don't need to take all these vitamins, minerals. Just get yourself a bottle of Tums, okay, which neutralizes stomach acid, right? Okay. It has calcium in it. And just take a couple of Tums 3 times a day and you'll get enough calcium. And it just makes everything worse. Yeah. I mean, that's the craziness that these medical doctors do. Now, I have to say one more thing here. There was a very famous black guy, a billionaire, by the name of Herman Cain, the CEO of Godfather's Pizza. He just died a couple of days ago. He was diagnosed the last day of June of this year with COVID-19, and he had some respiratory distress. So next day, the first day of July, they put him in the hospital, and they gave him some oxygen, and he was feeling better. Now, this guy ran for U.S. president in the Republican Party in 2008. He was a billionaire. He was the CEO, and he made Godfather's Pizza. He was 74 years old, a black billionaire. He's a black guy, okay? And so they gave him some oxygen. It kind of perked him up a little bit, but he was very rapidly declining. And then when he died, they did the autopsy, of course, and he didn't have any viral infections in the lungs. There was no fluid in his lungs. So why was he having all this respiratory problem? Because all the capillaries in his lungs, listen to me, all the capillaries in his lungs were filled with microscopic blood clots that were abnormal blood clots. They didn't contain platelets. These blood clots were chemically induced blood clots, not blood platelets induced blood clots. And why is that? Well, because when you have 74 years of eating gluten, like Herman Cain had, including the pizza crust, okay, guess what? His villi, his intestines are gone. He had less than 3% absorptive surface left in his intestines. He couldn't absorb the nutrients necessary for the megakaryocyte cells in his bone marrows to make platelets. And you know, as a pharmacist, there are many, many people when they get a blood test, oh, my doctor says I have low platelets. I've got low red blood cells. I got low white blood cells. And I've been taking supplements and it doesn't help. So I have to go in once a month for a shot, for a B12 shot and an iron shot. They're going to give me a transfusion once a month so I can get platelets given to me by somebody else's blood. That's because their bone marrow is dead, because their intestines are dead, so they cannot absorb the nutrients for their bone marrows to make platelets. Okay, and so when COVID comes along and they're bleeding, guess what? They either die, some of them, they have basketball-sized blood clots in their belly cavities when they die from COVID. They didn't die from the viral infection. They died from all these pre-existing conditions, okay? That's why a 3-year-old, when they get COVID, even a black 3-year-old, when they get COVID, they get, you can't even call it a fever because, you know, normal temperature in a black kid is 98.6. And when they get COVID, it'll be like 99 or 99.5. And in 3 days' time, after 3 days of minor symptoms like a common cold, they're all better. And that's because, what's the difference between a 3-year-old and a billionaire like Herman Cain, who dies at 74? Well, Herman Cain had been eating gluten for 74 years. And he could get the very best because he was a billionaire. Okay, he couldn't absorb nutrients even if he was supplementing. I tried asking Siri, and Siri didn't know if he was supplementing, but his intestines were dead, less than 3% absorption. And so he had these weird little microscopic abnormal blood clots the size of a period in a printed page in all his capillaries. And that's what kills people with COVID. Just like when those 20 million people died in India 100 years ago from the Spanish flu, H1N1, they didn't die of viral flu infections of the lungs. They all hemorrhaged to death because they'd all been eating wheat for 10,000 years in India.
Another thing I wanted to go back on too, when we were talking about red meat, I remember 20, maybe 25 years ago, this big study came out that said, you know, that red meat caused all these problems. Fast forward maybe 10 years and they redid the study, but this time they defined what they called red meat. And they broke it down between processed red meat and steak,
on
that
the Barbie
type of red meat,
yeah.
roast. And in that study, it showed the red meat, the roasts, the steaks, the burgers, they weren't the problem. It was the processed red meats, the hot dogs, the bolognas, that type thing. So what's going on there? What's different that they're doing to that?
Well, when you have sausages and hot dogs and you know, pre-packaged burgers and even things like lunch meats of all kinds, bologna, salami, and so on. There's, you know, probably 5 or 6 or 8 different chemicals in there, okay, including nitrates. And of course, nitrates are very, very bad, and that they do cause an extreme amount of inflammation. And that was my first scientific paper I ever wrote. I was only 22 years old. I was a pathology student. I was a veterinary student at the time. I had just gotten my degree in agriculture in 1962 from the University of Missouri. I was so proud of that. And I didn't have enough money, so I was working for the pathology department, you know, helping them with autopsies and chemistries and microbiology and, you know, growing bacteria and viruses and things and looking at parasites under the microscope. I was doing autopsies on animals and people. I'm only 22 years old, and it was December of 1962, and everybody's on Christmas, and I'm the new guy on the block, so I had to stay. I get dumped with 50 bodies. 500 died in one night in the state of Missouri. It was 500 sheep. They were 6 months old. They were 2 inches of wool. They were about ready to get sheared. They were going to go to market in the next week. Farmer gets up in the morning. All 500 are dead. He brings me 50 bodies. I cut the first one open, and the blood came out over the wool like chocolate milk. It's called methemoglobin, nitrates. And then I finished the autopsies on all 50 of them. They all had goiter. Now, the lobes of a thyroid gland of a 6-month-old sheep should be the size of an almond, not in the shell, but just the almond nut, the naked almond nut. These were the size of plums. So they had goiter, nitrates, okay? And so why did they all die in that night? Well, in Missouri, in the winter, whether it's October, November, December, January, February, the weather is just kind of mild because of the Mississippi River bringing up heat from the Gulf and so forth. So it could be 45 to 65 degrees every day. And it was. But the night they all died, it was 19 degrees. And they all died of hypothermia. I had figured all that out, got the blood test. Sure enough, they had high nitrate levels. This farmer's neighbor was using nitrate fertilizer, which got into the water of those sheep. And they were gradually getting it over the 6 months. And that's why they had the goiter and the methemoglobin. They'd have gone to market if the temperature hadn't dropped to 19 that one night. They'd have gone to market. They'd have been able to be sheared and the wool and so forth. But at any rate, I wrote that up and got it published. All the professors came back and I said, well, can I be a co-author on this or something or mention? He said, we weren't even here. This is your paper. So it was my first paper I wrote. It was published in 2 veterinary journals. It was really a hallmark paper, okay, on pollution. And that was the paper that was used to get my $25 million grant to do the 20,000 autopsies at the Center for the Biology of Natural Systems in Washington University. And of course, it was Marlon Perkins, the old Mutual Omaha Wild Kingdom show, who took that. I didn't even recognize the importance. I didn't recognize it. He took it and he applied to NIH, and he got from NIH that $25 million using my paper. So he made me the pathologist on that project as a result. So it's the nitrates.
Somebody asked, is uncured ham with no nitrates okay to eat? And that should be fine.
Yeah, well, pork is a very common meat used all over the world, particularly in low-income countries. In Africa, Asia, South America, and even in poorer European places, pork is very common food because a pig will eat anything. Okay, cattle, they need pasture and grain. A pig will eat anything, and so garbage and all kinds of stuff like that. So that's why they're such a popular animal. Of course, if you're an Orthodox Jewish person, there's several other religions that don't eat pork because pigs do eat everything. Okay, and there's some people that won't use milk products along with meat, and there's vegetarians. There's all kinds of dietary groups and everything like that, and so. But the pork is very commonly eaten all over the world, and pork in of itself is not bad. Okay, you just have to cook it because they do get parasites because they do eat everything, and so they do get parasites, particularly in poorer countries where the hygiene is not all the best, and so you do have to cook it well enough to kill the worms.
Right.
Oh, barbecue. Well, pork is a very common barbecue. Pork ribs. Pork steaks and that kind of stuff. Again, historically, when there were slaves, the slaves would get the livers, which had, the minerals stored in it, particularly selenium and copper and things like that, and zinc and so on. And so they would get things that the plantation owners weren't getting. Okay. And so they also would eat what was called offal. Okay. And offal was the lungs and the heart and the liver and the kidneys and stuff like that. Steak and kidney pie. It was a piece of steak the size of a cracker and then 2 quarts of kidneys, because that's what the Uncle Remus and Uncle Tom got. And that's why they lived to be 110 and the plantation owner died of 45. Okay, well, I can talk a little bit more while you're thinking. Again, when you go back to the book and the CD, Black Gene Lies, every black kid in America needs to read this book. Every doctor, every medical student needs to read this book and pass the test on it before they get their medical license. If they do that, that will double the lifespan of Black people in America, okay, and the world. This should be the textbook in every medical school, in every pre-medical course, and it should be every grandma, every minority grandma, whether they're Native American or Black, any other community, such as Latinos, where there are small numbers, okay, they're a minority in certain communities, and Latinos. Every one of these people should be giving grandmas and grandpas and moms and dads should be sitting down every Tuesday night or every Thursday night, instead of watching TV and old reruns and everything. They should be reading about one disease in this book that's thought to be genetic in their community that isn't. And okay, this is why we're drinking this instead of Red Bull. This is why we're drinking Rebound, because it has 100 nutrients in it, where Red Bull only has 2 or 3. It's mostly sugar and caffeine. Okay, and so that's why we came up with this. So there would be all these nutrients in the sports drink. And of course, Theo Ratliff is why we made it for him. Okay, we made this for him. And of course, it's just one of those things where he is just a wonder. I talk to him, I call him a couple times every month, because he's a big advocate in the Black sports community about the longevity products, preventing joint and muscle and tendon and ligament and cartilage problems. Okay, and then of course drinking this Rebound instead of Gatorade and Red Bull.
Yeah, we're actually running out of time, so I'll get to the next topic next time. But you know what? Everybody's running around, all the political, social issues going on, and this is an issue that really needs to be addressed, and it's not. Nobody else is talking about it except for you, Dr. Wally. The black gene lies. Black lives do matter. And the medical system, the social justice, none of them are addressing the nutritional deficiencies that are causing this problem.
Which also it also causes the emotional stuff, all the, right, bad behavior. It gets the young Black kids in trouble is because they're undernourished. They've got plenty of calories. They might be getting red meat, but they're not getting vitamins and minerals. Oh, can I say why? Do I have enough time to say why they're not getting enough minerals?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, up until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882, on Pearl Street, New York City, okay, everybody was getting their minerals, supplements, from the wood ashes from the wood stoves and the fireplaces. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882, on Pearl Street, New York City, Thomas Edison pulled the switch on the first commercial electric generating plant. Within 10 years, we had all these crazy diseases nobody ever heard of before, because there was no more wood ashes to put in the gardens as fertilizer, and there was no more wood ashes to eat when you were having cravings called pica, P-I-C-A, which is a behavior that people get when they're minerally deficient. They'll eat dirt. Grandma used to eat dirt. Kids would eat dirt. And in a sandbox plan, there'd be one shovel full of sand in a little bucket and one shovel of sand in their mouth, because they were minerally deficient. Well, once we went to electricity, there was no more wood ashes to put in the garden. And of course, when you burnt the wood, the minerals in the tree didn't burn. If there was 20 minerals in the soil where the tree came from, there was 20 minerals in that wood ash. If there was 40 minerals in the soil where that tree came from, there was 40 minerals in that wood ash. If there was 3 minerals in the soil where that tree came from, there was 3 minerals in that wood ash. Okay, so the only way you can guarantee that you're going to get all 90 essential nutrients, including all 60 essential minerals, is to supplement with them. And that's what we do in the animal industry. That's why we don't have to have health insurance for farmers for animals. Now, we do have life insurance for expensive racehorses, but there's no need for for health insurance, because we've eliminated all the diseases that disable us and kill us for humans. And you need insurance because you'd never be able to pay the bills. But in animals, we give them the 90 essential nutrients. And that's where I got the idea when I was 9 years old to do that for people like we did in animals.
Thomas Edison lived in Louisville from 1866 to 1867 when he electrified Louisville.
Oh, there you go. That explains
Dr.
everything.
Wallach, again, it's been fantastic talking with you. I do want to let people know that a copy of that new DVD is coming out hopefully next week.
Is Your Doctor Killing You is the title.
Dr. Killing You, so stay tuned for that. I do want to remind everybody I've got 2 free gifts for staying all the way to the end. We've got a digital copy that you can watch online of Someone Should Go to Jail from Dr. Wallach. That's the sequel to Dead Doctors Don't Lie. It's called Someone Should Go to Jail. And also Dr. Wallach mentioned a lot about young athletes and some of the issues they're having. I put together a little pamphlet called Why So Many Young Athletes Die. It's actually written by Dr. Wallach. So that's also available to you for free. All you have to do is go to dddlvideo.com. That stands for Dead Doctors Don't Lie, dddlvideo.com. You can get both of these there. And there's also a health questionnaire there, a health evaluation system. So you can fill out the health questionnaire and learn about the types of nutrients that you need based on your specific health issues that you're having. If you are a longevity representative, I encourage you to get that health evaluation system for yourself. I will put a link to that in the notes, but it will help you with your patients, your clients, your prospects, your family, your loved ones, to give them an evaluation so they can see exactly where it is that they stand when it comes to their health and nutrition. It's very inexpensive. And like I said, I'll link that in the show notes. Next week, we'll be back at this again. I'm going to try next week to get back to doing some questions and answers. So if any of you have any specific questions for Dr. Wallach, you can send me an email at askpharmacistkeith@live.com. If you have health evaluations that you've done for some of your clients and you'd like for us to discuss the health evaluation on there, you can send a copy of it to me. Make sure you get permission from the person that you did the evaluation with. And I am a pharmacist, so it's not going to go anywhere beyond me. When we have the discussion on the air, it'll be just the facts, not the people's information. So that's something else. If you send me that information, we'll have a whole show of questions and answers. Does that sound good to you, Dr. Wallach?
Sounds like a winner.
All right. So we'll see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. 11 a.m. Eastern time on Monday, 8 a.m. Pacific time on Monday. See you guys again soon.
God bless.
God bless you.
This has been the Prosperity RX podcast with pharmacist Keith Abell. Prosperity RX, your prescription for health, wellness, and prosperity. If you found value with this episode, please share and go to Apple iTunes, make a comment, and give us a 5-star rating. Also subscribe to iTunes or your favorite podcast platform. Prosperity RX can also be found on YouTube at youtube.com/Prosperity RX. Pharmacist Keith is also a business entrepreneur. He helps folks from all walks of life start and run their own home-based business. If you'd like Keith to help you create your own business, then visit aimhighforsuccess.com.